The results of an eyebrow-raising Tennessee special election are in. I'm going to cover all of that right here. It's very important. I don't think either side truthfully won last night, but we'll discuss the results here. Plus, Speaker Mike Johnson trying to tell us that this has been one of the most effective Congresses in American political history. I'm going to look into how true that statement really is. And then also the juicy red meat story of the day, President Donald Trump in his cabinet meeting yesterday going absolutely off, calling Ilhan Omar a telling the press that he just doesn't want immigrants in this country anymore from third world hellholes. We're going to cover that and look at just exactly what he's actually doing rather than saying when it comes to preventing immigrants from those countries coming here. And then finally, I'm going to cover the poll that I put up on my community tabs, as well as read your comments underneath it. That poll being, of course, the one where I ask, should President Donald Trump fire FBI Director Kash Patel? Going to cover that right here, right now on American Advocates, episode 15. Congratulations to Matt Van Epps on his big congressional win in the great state of Tennessee. The radical left Democrats threw everything at him, including millions of dollars. Another great night for the Republican Party, President DJT. And here's the thing, overall it was a good night for the GOP in this special congressional election in Tennessee. Now the Republicans gain an additional +1 lead in Congress because of this. However, there's a lot more to this story that should be an absolute eyebrow raiser if you're a Republican. And truthfully, it should be an eyebrow raiser if you're a Democrat too, because there was a lot of narrative spinning going on just before this election. Democrats were insisting, according to the polling data, which you should never trust at this point. I don't know who relies on polling information anymore in 2025 after literally decades of proof that most polls are wildly inaccurate. Nevertheless, Democrats had their hopes up over this district. You see, while the Republicans are in a civil war, and we certainly are hashing some things out right now, a generational divide is fracturing the party. You have the boomers and the Xers versus the millennials and the Gen Zers, and I would even say some of the older millennials are siding more with the boomers, the younger millennials are with the Gen Zers. It's a mess. It is a mess. Things need to be worked out. There's a great wealth divide, et cetera, et cetera. And so you see this term, MAGA is dead. MAGA's on life support, yada, yada, yada. And the Democrats were looking at this polling information for this special election, which Matt Van Epps, you can see, ultimately wound up winning by 9 points, coming in 7 points higher than in the polls. But that's right, the polls had him at just a 2-point lead, which is well within the margin of error. And this is Tennessee, Republican state, of course. And so Democrats this entire time are thinking, oh my God, MAGA's dead for sure. We might win this district in Tennessee. We might gain a seat in Congress while Trump is president in his first year. This is a disgrace to MAGA. MAGA's dead. It's over. His own party hates him. This is beautiful. That's what Democrats thought. And then they embarrassingly got defeated by 9 points rather than winning like many of them sincerely thought they were going to. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows on the MAGA side of the party either, because truthfully, this should have been an easy win for Republicans. And a 9-point lead is decently significant. But what I want to point out is that Trump last year won this specific district, this county, by 22 points. And so what we're really looking at here is both embarrassing for Democrats who somehow deluded themselves into thinking they were going to win this and ultimately didn't, and not only lost, but lost by a lot. However, to be down by 22 points to 9, a 13-point difference, that's an eyebrow raiser if you're a Republican. You need to look at this and ask yourself why that happened. And, you know, I've seen the copium on here. Only a fool compares a general presidential election against a special election. Yeah, you can honestly off with that, okay? There is something to this, and there's something that needs to be said when it comes to this, because truthfully, you should never expect full turnout, yes. So a 22-point win for Van Epps here wasn't going to be realistic, but a 13-point drop is not a good sign. Van Epps truthfully should have won this, I would say, by 16 points, 17 points. So to only win by 9 is not good. And I looked at New York last year, around this time the same way, because New York only voted Democrat by around the same amount of points. I think it was 9, 10, or 11 points. Very unusual for New York, which is usually a deep blue state. Same with California. I was looking at that state as well. You know, we looked at these states and we saw that the Democrats lost all this ground, and we went, yes, the red wave. And so you have to apply that same logic here during this special Tennessee election. Giving up 13 points is significant. And so this is not a massive GOP win. It's an eyebrow-raising win, and Republicans need to be wise about this, and you need to learn from this. They need to be asking the right questions, because truthfully, I think they're losing more and more ground as they continue to seemingly conduct themselves according to how boomers, which is, to be frank with you, a dying generation at this point, how they want things done. And that's just foolish. Young people are sick of politicians at this point, and whichever side can convince young people that they're anti-establishment first and pro-good economy and are willing to help the youth, that will be the side that wins future elections. And Republicans are continuing to drop the ball with not just their messaging, but in general, they're dropping the ball with their policies. And, you know, not for lack of trying on the messaging, because here's Speaker Mike Johnson trying to just gaslight us into believing that this Congress has been one of the most effective Congresses in American political history. Yeah, he actually said that.
Now, in spite of the fact that we had razor-thin majority, I mean, it many times, as you know, 1 or 2 vote margin, we still have had one of the most consequential Congresses in the great history of this extraordinary nation. And you know, if you look at what has been accomplished for the first 10 months of this term, this year, the 119th Congress, this new administration, you could stack that up against any Congress in history. I think it's probably in the top 5 in terms of marquee landmark achievements. And, you know, part of our, both a blessing and a curse is we did so much of it in the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Families Tax Cut. There's so much to talk about. It's as if it just got brushed aside.
Now, you know, this is some clever messaging here. It's basically him using the Big Beautiful Bill as the ultimate excuse for why Congress hasn't signed more bills. I've got all the stats pulled up, though. And the bottom line is, yeah, the Big Beautiful Bill is a wonderful present to the American people overall. Of course, politicians snuck in some bullshit into that bill as well, which has made it not as great, in my opinion. But there are some great things in there that we're waiting to come to fruition. Nevertheless, just because you pass one big, beautiful bill doesn't mean that you get to say, well, that's basically like 300 bills in one. Because the fact of the matter is, it's not. It's a couple of great things that Americans are going to benefit from. Great. But let's look at what Congress has actually done. I've taken some notes on this. The 119th Congress, which is this current one, has only codified 28 of Trump's 217 executive orders. And this is the first thing I want to talk about, because I've pointed this out as criticism before for Congress. They're not matching the pace of the president. And as critical as I've been of President Donald Trump over the last month and a half here on this channel, I will still say he's a president that got to work. A lot of these executive orders, of course, he signed within his first 3 months in office. He was at that point very popular with the American people still, and was definitely going to town on them. And we loved every second of it for the most part. But the problem is, those are just executive orders. They are only in effect for a very limited amount of time. And unless Congress codifies them and makes them law, then the next president, if it's not a Republican especially, can come in and undo all of it. How is it that the president can get 217 executive orders signed not even inside of a year, and Congress only codifies 28 of those? That's disgraceful, actually. I got another statistic here that'll really boil your blood. This House of Congress has only enacted 121 bills so far this year. And he wants to sit there and say that they've been one of the top 5 Congresses of all time? I've got a stat pulled up here. The 95th Congress, from the years 1977 to 1979, enacted 1,170 bills. So comparing 1,170 to just 121, essentially this 119th Congress is only a tenth as good as the 95th House of Congress all those years ago. And you know, there's a couple of things you can say to sort of defend this House of Congress compared to the 70s. The 1970s were by far way less polarized, politically speaking. You go back and watch these debates between Democrats and Republicans back then, and they literally agree on 85% of issues, and it's only the 15% that divide them that they actually wind up debating about. You'll listen to these debates, and they're the most civil, friendly-looking thing after. These politicians pretty much were treating each other to lunch afterwards. It's just not even close to what it is now, where it's like we are at each other's throats nowadays. And so certainly, it's probably harder for Congress to get stuff done in a more polarized political environment like we're seeing nowadays. That much I will say in Mike Johnson's defense. But at the end of the day, I still blame them for not getting enough done because there's things that they could and should be doing regardless. You can't just absolve them of responsibility when the Republicans have always seemingly had an excuse for not being able to get enough done. Blaming Democrats, of course. You know, we don't really live to see such times like this that often where the Republicans have complete control over everything. Supreme Court, Congress, Senate, executive branch via the president. I mean, we have it all. And the Democrats are using minor and what should be inconsequential tactics to slow everything down. It shouldn't be working. I don't know why they're not just ignoring it. And I don't know why they're not wielding their power more effectively. It's literally like the Republicans don't want to win. And it's beyond frustrating, especially as a younger, more fiery person. This is partly what is causing the divide inside of the Republican Party and in general. Young people look at these Republicans nowadays, like Mike Johnson, John Thune, and even President Trump himself sometimes, as a spineless cuck. And that's why I like what I'm seeing when it comes to what Anna Paulina Luna is doing here, forcing legislation now to try to pass that will prohibit members from trading stocks while holding these offices. It's literally insider trading, and it's a major reason why we see so many of these people take office with barely six figures to their name, if that. And by the time they're done, either voted out or many of them just retire after literally decades. They're wealthy and they're worth multi-millions of dollars. And so there's not even an incentive for them to do well because it's almost a guarantee that if you can gain these positions of power with your insider knowledge, you'll just make all the right stock picks all the time and you will just increase your wealth by 100x. It's inexcusable. And it's certainly one of the reasons why our politicians no longer represent us.
Hey everyone, so I just left the floor with Representative Burchett, and after our bipartisan coalition and talking this morning, we have decided, because of a lack of movement from the House of Representatives, to initiate the discharge petition on banning insider trading, meaning it is live now. Now, if leadership wants to put forward a bill that would actually do that and end the corruption, we're all for it, but we're tired of the partisan games. This is the most bipartisan thing in U.S. history, and it's time that the House of Representatives listens to the American people. So it is now live. Anything to say, Burchett?
Let's make America proud. Hey, this place is broken. It is a complete open sewer. Let's at least tell America we're trying to do something right. Anybody making 600% return on their dadgum investment needs to leave Washington, and then you get their butts up to Wall Street.
Go to Wall Street.
Something tells me if these politicians weren't holding office, they wouldn't be making a 600% return on their stock market investments anymore. This should be a no-brainer. And this needs to pass. On top of that, I propose the next thing they do is self-impose term limits on themselves. Via legislation, of course, so that it's not just an honor system where you assume they're going to impose term limits. Pass legislation for term limits for Congress. And same for all of these branches of government, to be honest with you. It shouldn't just be the president that has a term limit. We shouldn't be seeing stories of Nancy Pelosi retiring after 40 plus years of service. Disgraceful. Great example of an insider trader, too, by the way. And so this Congress, moral of the story, this election that we saw in Tennessee, inconsequential for a whole host of reasons. An eyebrow raiser for a whole host of reasons. Democrats didn't win like they thought they were going to, but Republicans shouldn't be celebrating this victory either. It's also an inconsequential election because, yeah, Republicans gained another seat, increased their majority. What the are they going to do with that majority, though? Guarantee you not much at all, because they're afraid to wield power and they love sitting there while they have power and just making money. Too decadent, too lavish, too spoiled, not representative enough, or at all in most cases, of the actual American people. Worse yet, they don't fear their own constituents, us. They're not even worried about making us upset. They just assume that we're going to continue to vote Republican because, well, they're not Democrat and they're not socialist, so what choice do we have? And that's why what you're seeing is this generational divide with young people who literally will either vote socialist or won't vote at all and let a socialist win. And you can say that that's accelerationism or that you should never just allow the system to burn down to the ground like that. And at least they're not Democrat socialists. But the fact of the matter is the divide is happening because the young people are not boomers. They don't share the boomer mentality of, well, we'll never vote Democrat or we'll always vote Republican at the end of the day. We hate being hamstrung like that. It feels like we're almost being held hostage off of ideology. Yes, these Republicans are better technically, but if they're not going to represent us, And they just are holding that to us, where basically they're looking down at us and saying, I won't do what you want, but you're going to vote for me anyway because I'm a Republican and I'll make sure things don't get as bad as quickly if you vote me in. That no longer flies. And that's why all of the special elections last month went to Democrats. And that's why this election in general, this Tennessee special election, it does not matter. It is not the victory the GOP is painting it out to be, and it also is not the victory that the Democrats wanted it to be. Congress is lazy, Congress is ineffective, and our political landscape needs to change. If you agree with that statement, be sure to leave a comment down below, subscribe to American Advocates for more. I'm going to move on to the next story here. This is the red meat, the meat and potatoes that everybody's excited about. President Donald Trump, after apparently dozing off in his own cabinet meeting, woke up and went on an incredible rant. It puts a smile on my face, puts a smile on most Americans' faces, even some of the Democrats, because they don't like immigration either.
Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain, and do nothing but bitch, we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Now, of course, that nasty, stanky, garbage Ilhan Omar, and hey, those are the president's words, not mine, all right? She went on the news because she's steaming about this statement from President Donald Trump in his cabinet meeting. She just had to address it.
He's always been a racist, a bigot, a xenophobic, and Islamophobic. We know that he called African nations a shithole in his first administration. We know that escalator.
She can't even say it without smiling.
Stop Muslim immigration into this country. And so it is not surprising that he is going after black immigrants in this country. And it's certainly not surprising that he's choosing a black immigrant community that is also Muslim. But what I would like to say is that most of us are citizens. On our passport, it says we are nationals of this country. We love that Minnesota has welcomed us. Many of us have not been settled in Minnesota. We chose it as a home because the Minnesota people and the state is beautiful and very welcoming, and we are going to be here regardless of what the president has to say.
I agree.
She couldn't even say all that without smiling because she knows it's hilarious at the end of the day. And the fact of the matter is she can use all of the phobic words possible. He's an Islamophobe. He's a xenophobe. He's a brownophobe. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. We don't care. We share his opinion of it all. Even Democrats don't like illegal immigration. And the fact of the matter is this was long overdue. And on top of it, President Donald Trump is completely correct. They talk about how America sucks and the Constitution sucks and everything here needs to change. But change like what? How you have things back home? This is what Somalia looks like. I mean, does this look like paradise to you? Honestly? Of course, Ilhan Omar says Minnesota looks beautiful. Anything looks beautiful compared to this hellhole. This is literally a shithole. Here's another photo. Oh, the beautiful ocean. Look at those nasty, crusty-ass buildings in the background. I mean, people are sleeping in those buildings. Beautiful landscape there, right? But look at those shacks that they call houses. And really, that's the thing, isn't it? Why would we accept people from countries like that? Why would we ever take them on the merit that we assume that they would provide something beneficial to this country? Clearly they don't. And now you have these Great Lake region states like Minnesota that are turning into hellholes because of the Somalis. Straight up. It's just reality. And they're defrauding the government and sending the money back to their country that still, at the end of the day, winds up looking like this. Do you know of any great Somalian philosophers that you can name me? Any Somalian artists that are world renowned? Any Somalian inventors? No. And that's for a reason. Now, of course, Minneapolis officials are losing their minds over this. And the mayor of Minneapolis, who's an absolute Democrat cucklord, partnered up with a Somalian police officer who he gave the mic to read off a statement in the Somalian language when it comes to ICE being sent to Minneapolis at Trump's command to start deporting Somalians there.
waa fahanna soo maaha arrinta kale ku soo xigta waxay tahay haddii qof aad u malaynaysid inuu aad hubin inuu yahay dawladda inuu ka soco sida ice oo kale inuu yahay ama uu yahay askari oo aad hubin inuu askari runa yahay qof kasta iska soo xiran kara dharka waxaan ku leenahay waxaa inaad soo wacda Minneapolis Police 911.
Now, I don't know about you, but even just hearing a language like that being spoken in front of an American audience of some sort on social media, television, or even in front of a crowd really pisses me off, especially in light of the fact that President Donald Trump literally did sign an order declaring English as the national language. And at the time, I remember Democrats profusely made fun of that. But here is a great example of why we actually need that to be declared. And as such, since it is declared officially that English is our native language here in America, openly having government workers, officials, politicians speaking in another language where you can absolutely guarantee Americans are definitely watching should be an offense that is punishable by a fine, in my opinion. People who speak foreign languages in this country when they're in positions of power and are presumably speaking to massive groups of people at a time. Fine them. Discourage this behavior because it's honestly reprehensible. It makes me feel sick watching it, and it should not be happening in America. But it got even worse than watching a Somalian police officer make statements like this in the Somali language. The mayor himself decided to make his own cutesy little statement. Mayor Cucklord of Minneapolis.
Our Somali community. Daman Shabka, Somaliyed Kunul, Minnesota Garahan, Minneapolis, Waan Kuji Janila Hai, Waan Ku Gereb Taganahan.
What an absolute soy boy, puss boy. You know, I get told all the time, it's cringe to point out when Democrat politicians adopt certain accents while they're speaking in front of crowds of people. We've seen Kamala Harris do that several times on her campaign trail. We've also seen Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez do that. I've pointed both of those out in YouTube shorts on my channel, both of which wound up getting hundreds of thousands of views, if I remember correctly, because people do want to see that, and it does make them feel weird to watch it happen. Democrats, of course, that's cringe, man. What do you mean? You mean you don't do that when you're around black people or something? No, I don't. I speak the way I speak. I'm not worried about conforming socially to another group. And it's a uniquely Democrat thing, it appears. I'm sure you can point out an obscure Republican who does it from time to time, but it's always the Democrats. They don't have any form of identity other than the mindset and identity of, please like me and vote for me. I'll do or say anything, and I'll say it in any way needed with any accent you'd like, and now in any language you'd like to continue voting for me. That's what's going on here. It's reprehensible. I remember being in high school having to learn Spanish and thinking it was stupid. English is my language. And I don't plan on not being in America ever, so I only plan on ever hearing English. English should only ever be spoken to me. I don't understand anything else. And with English being the national language, like this right here should be fine. That mayor should be fined. But I'm going to hit you with the it gets worse ×3, because then the Minneapolis police chief goes on TV and tells Somalians that if they see ICE agents wearing masks, rounding people up for deportations, that they should call the police on the ICE agents.
Folks that are masked, that they're not sure if they're law enforcement, that they may be kidnapping people. Like, we have had those reports. I want to be clear to the community. The community should know that if you see something like that is legitimate, that you don't know if someone is law enforcement, you should call 911. And you should provide as much information as possible.
I don't even have too much to say on this. I'm really sick, actually, of covering terrible behavior from Democrats who are exploiting loopholes, like in this case where the messaging is obviously encouraging atrocious behavior. And the Republicans will, of course, argue, well, we really can't do anything about it. Or, you know, something like this will be brought to the attention of the Trump DOJ only for absolutely nothing to happen at all. And so I'm just not going to say it anymore. I don't expect firm justice to be delivered on behalf of the American people under this Trump DOJ. I just don't. It's not really worth covering beyond that, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention regardless, because I had to see it, and so do you now. If my blood's boiling, I want yours to be boiling as well, okay? But that's pretty much it. There's no need to reiterate the now tiresome narrative of the Trump DOJ needs to do something. They need to do something. Pam Bondi, you need to do so. Arrest him. It's never gonna happen. Now, President Donald Trump would go on to speak even more on this matter when it comes to the immigrants, openly saying that he just doesn't want them here. And again, this puts a smile on my face. This is the messaging that we want, and this is the Trump that we expected.
And they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you. Okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country.
Absolutely based and 100% true. And I was starting to think that I was the only one who could see it, or that us MAGA voters were the only one who could see it. I was starting to think that somehow President Donald Trump either forgot or just wasn't seeing it clearly. But apparently he is. Apparently he knows this. But now the real question is, because I'll tell you this, I'm sick of just being fed political slop like this that gets me excited. It's great to hear, but if nothing is done, then what does it matter? So I decided to spend the better half of this morning researching what actually is being done about this. And it turns out there is something officially being done. This was a policy memorandum from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services from just yesterday, December 2nd, 2025, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The subject, hold and review of all pending asylum applications and all USCIS benefit applications filed by aliens from high-risk countries. The purpose, effective immediately. This memorandum directs U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services personnel to place a hold on all forms I-589 application for asylum and for withholding or removal, regardless of the alien's country or nationality, pending a comprehensive review. And it directs Immigration Services personnel to conduct a comprehensive re-review of approved benefit requests for aliens from countries listed in the PP 10949 who entered the United States on or after January 20th, 2021. That is, of course, the date that Joe Biden was sworn in, I believe. In short, this is a memorandum that is halting immigration from third world countries, specifically 19 third world countries. And yes, that number is important because in all honesty, when I heard it was 19 third world countries, I thought to myself, that's it? There certainly are more than 19 third world countries, aren't there? So I wound up doing some research, and it turns out, yeah, first of all, no brainer, there are way more than 19 third world countries. Second of all, on a world map, here are the 19 third world countries that President Donald Trump has now officially halted immigration from. And this is where, in my opinion, we're sort of being gaslit once again by President Donald Trump and his administration. Not entirely, but I'm going to go over some of these countries. I did a lot of research on these countries, taking a look specifically at the immigration stats that I could find on the internet from last year, 2024. How many immigrants were coming into America from some of these countries? And then I'm going to tell you my biggest problem with this, mainly the countries that are missing from this list that should absolutely be on it. And so once again, looking at this map, I want to point out some of these names that I think are just so inconsequential that they're a complete waste of time, like Turkmenistan. We only took reportedly 50 total immigrants last year from Turkmenistan, but President Donald Trump was quick to ban them as one of the 19 third world countries sending immigrants here. 50. I mean, that barely registers. I also noticed one of the larger ones there in Africa, Libya. We only took reportedly 100 total immigrants from Libya last year. Again, inconsequential. Equatorial Guinea. You can see that's in Africa there, closer to Central Africa. 100 total immigrants migrated here to America last year in 2024, based off the stats that I could find on the internet. Another one in Central Africa, Togo. 300 total immigrants. Sierra Leone there, Basically, in West Africa, you can see 500 total immigrants. Again, really nothing, in my opinion. You can also see Sudan. That's in northern Africa. Just under 600 total immigrants came in from Sudan last year in 2024. And so a lot of these countries that are on this list, I think are on here on purpose because they really are inconsequential, but it's a bigger showing. It's a bigger statement to say, I've just banned 19 third world countries from sending immigrants to America. But looking at the raw data on a lot of these countries, it's like, well, it literally doesn't matter. These are not the countries we were anticipating when we were told about this. To his credit, there are some countries on here that are consequential and do matter. Let's take a look at those ones. The Republic of Congo, for instance, Central Africa. I'm actually glad that that is on this list. 12,000 immigrants were coming from Congo into America last year alone in 2024, according to immigration statistics I could find online. And that is 12,000 too many, in my opinion. That is a very violent region. They've been exposed to civil war for 30 years. And I would not be happy knowing that we are taking a lot of immigrants or refugees, for that matter, from that region into this country. Straight up. I also want to point out east of the Congo there, you can see Somalia. Ilhan Omar's shithole home country. We did take 9,000 immigrants last year from Somalia. Most of them probably did wind up in Minnesota. And that is 9,000 too many as well. We should not be receiving anybody from Somalia or anybody from the Congo. Just south of Florida there, you can see Cuba and Haiti. We should also not be receiving immigrants from those countries. Cuba, we took 45,000, so that's pretty consequential. And Haiti, we took 80,000 from. And that's a big deal. And also the biggest country on that list is actually Venezuela, which again, I'm very thrilled to hear we're not taking any immigrants from. It's been completely halted. We took roughly 250,000 immigrants from Venezuela in 2024 alone, according to the stats that I saw online. That is way too many. And so there are about 5 countries on here that I would say are pretty consequential, pretty important to ban immigration from, or at least halt it from. And it's not all bad news as a result. It's not all just for show. It's not all just gaslighting. But you look at, again, like some of these countries, Turkmenistan, inconsequential. It just doesn't matter. Some of these names are just outrageous. A lot of Americans don't even know that these countries exist. And some are in the middle. You have countries like what I wrote down here, Yemen, 1,400, Laos, 1,200, Burundi, 1,800, etc. And it's just like, that's just middle of the road stuff. It's like, okay, good. I guess I'm happy that we're not taking immigrants from Yemen. That's probably for the best. But it's not something that I've been passionately advocating against, where it's like, we gotta stop taking 1,000 immigrants from Yemen every year. It's disgraceful. No, I don't care that much. The countries that I think everybody was thinking about when it came to immigration are the big time countries. Like, let's start with Mexico, for instance. I actually wrote down the stats here for Mexico. 140,000 reported immigrants came from Mexico in 2024. Now, of course, you're going to think to yourself, that seems very low. That's legal immigrants, according to the stats that I was looking at. 140,000 legal Mexican immigrants came to this country in 2024. Of course, it's important to also note that under Joe Biden, that number was millions, because Joe Biden blatantly disregarded our normal immigration policy and decided that every Mexican who came through the border was legal during his presidency. So we were receiving millions of them at a time. On top of that, I also want to make it clear that the 2024 immigration statistics still aren't out yet. So these are broad estimates as opposed to fine-tuned numbers. But when I'm talking about 140,000 Mexican immigrants, I'm talking about work transferred, qualified immigrants. And that's pretty much about the most we should be allowing in to our country from Mexico at any given year anyway. Especially under the Trump administration, I would assume that the vast majority of people coming into this country at this point are legal. He's done a great job at preventing illegal immigration. That much is for certain. And especially with Mexico, as he's been building up the border wall again, etc., and the border crossings are at record lows and continue to be. But the next 2 countries I wrote down are especially the ones people were thinking about, and surprise, surprise, they're not on this list of third world countries we're halting immigration from. And that would be, of course, China and India. And these are the 2 that I have the biggest problem with. But apparently Trump loves Chinese immigrants and Indian immigrants in this country. He's been very clear in prior interviews, very unpopular ones with Laura Ingraham, that America quite simply just will not thrive without vastly superior, much smarter Indian workers coming here to take jobs from us Americans. And he's been very clear that for some reason, the colleges here across America simply will not survive without Chinese students coming here to pay money for tuition. And for whatever reason, he would be devastated to find out that half of all of these colleges, mind you, these are liberal woke institutions that brainwash our children, apparently they'd go out of business, and that would be terrible for America. So the Chinese students are still going to be welcome. The Indian workers are still going to be welcome. And I wrote down the numbers of immigrants coming from these countries. 75,000 legal immigrants were accepted into America in 2024 from China. Then you have to add on the big number. 290,000 student visas from China. You add those two together for a whopping 365,000. And those are all legal, mind you. I didn't even bother looking at the illegal stats for last year. Joe Biden was in office. It should go without saying plenty of illegals from all over the world were flooding our nation. India is even worse. India, in 2024, according to the data I saw, we accepted 110,000 immigrants from India. And when it comes to the student visas, we accepted 330,000 student visa Indians for a grand total of 440,000 immigrants from India in 2024. And when you combine India and China, you're at like 800,000 legal. Then you throw in Mexico and Central America, and you're already at 1 million annually at this point that are all legal, that the government says, yeah, this is okay. They may be replacing you Americans, but this is legal, so it's okay. And so all of this is to say that it's all well and dandy for President Donald Trump to put out these based tweets where he calls Tim Walz a retard and lets us know that he doesn't want ungrateful immigrants in this country anymore. It's all well and good that he wakes up out of his slumber in a cabinet meeting and goes off on a based rant about how Ilhan Omar is a stinky and how he can't stand her, and she's the worst thing that ever happened to Congress, and how he hates the Somalian immigrants being here because they are not doing anything as a net positive to America, and they don't even like our country. That's all well and good. It's even all well and good for him to start halting immigration from these third world countries, but don't put out a list like this when you know damn well the countries that everyday Americans think about when it comes to immigration and our immigration issues. And you know full well that Americans don't support immigration from those countries, especially not the young voters in this nation. And that's why I'll leave you off with this. Until I see immigration halted from countries like China and India, I will just not be all that impressed. Those are my honest thoughts on all of that, though. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And now for the final story, my latest poll on the Community Tabs page. Should President Trump fire FBI Director Kash Patel? And one of the rare times, I think, where I've put up a poll that I completely disagree with the results on when it comes to my community voting. I think you guys are all a bunch of stupid morons for this one. Only 19% of 720 total votes so far voted that yes, Kash Patel has failed us and should be fired, while 81% somehow think Kash Patel is doing good work. And so, I gotta say this. I don't know what you all are thinking, but when I talk about how there's clearly some sort of divide fracturing the MAGA party, the Republican Party as a whole, this is actually an example of that, in my opinion. Kash Patel has been an abysmal failure, in my opinion. He literally is one of the few people I've ever seen in my lifetime actively campaign for director of the FBI. I mean, he cared this much about obtaining this role back in 2022, 2023. He was all over the place talking about how they were dropping the ball, how corrupt they were, how they weren't transparent enough, and how they were blatantly hiding the Epstein client list and the Epstein files from us. All while delivering promises that it would be so much different if he could just become director of the FBI. If Trump could win, and if Trump would appoint him, he would release all of the information on the Epstein files, the JFK files, the MLK files, etc. He would expose all of the government secrets that they've been hiding from us. He would be ultimately way more transparent than in the past. And he essentially stated that he would turn the current corrupt FBI headquarters into a deep state museum. I mean, his promises were amazing. And then he becomes director of the FBI and basically does none of it. He becomes director of the FBI and all of a sudden Epstein, in fact, did kill himself in his cell. The Epstein files are basically just CSAM material that will never be released, and you need to stop asking for it because you're a dirty pervert to even ask for the Epstein files when we're telling you it's all CSAM material. I mean, that's just gross. At this point, stop asking. It's weird, bro. That's literally the FBI with Pam Bondi's messaging. There was no list. Stop asking. There were no names. Epstein only trafficked these women to himself. That's all that he did. He was just some very suspiciously wealthy guy who bought an island to just be alone to himself. And he ran a trafficking ring for just himself. Then he ultimately killed himself. I mean, I view that as an absolute failure because it was the one thing Kash Patel was known for, and he did not deliver. And now he's being forced to deliver. And I have a feeling when he does deliver, it's going to be a major disappointment because of him. Not because of what's there, because of him. I expect heavily redacted documents, straight up. Lack of transparency, unlike what was promised. And it looks terrible. Nevertheless, let's take a look at what you guys said in the comments down below. Maybe I can get some insight onto why people think this way. Glenn says, he's like Pam Bondi. No arrest and no prosecutions and no imprisoned criminals. They are obviously part of the swamp. And at some level, I agree. Obviously, Pam Bondi is ultimately the deciding factor in the Trump DOJ, so it's not on Kash Patel for there not being any prosecutions or imprisoned criminals. That is purely Pam Bondi's fault. But I do agree with the arrest part. We have not seen any major arrests, and Pam Bondi's mostly to blame for that too, but Kash Patel is certainly playing a role there. John Reichenberger says, Kash and Dan are making the FBI great again, smiley face heart. And to you, I just have to ask, why? Why do you think that? Kenneth Lowe, 5747. I recognize this guy. He's commented on some of my other stuff before. He says, this is why you won't even know whenever they will not see the hammer of justice come downtown on their corrupt asses. That's right. That would include the corrupt media system mob. Okay. I'm still waiting on that. Harpo77 says, those only the Epstein list still free, those stealing tax dollars still free, those who forged Biden's name to all of his work still free, Antifa still free to fight ICE, even Soros, the man funding this bullshit, is still free. We need leaders and directors with the balls to arrest and charge these morons. Yeah, dude, I completely agree with that, especially the whole Antifa situation. Where are the investigations into the Antifa scumbags who are throwing rocks at our ICE officers, who are making threats against our ICE officers? Where's the updates on that? Whatever is happening to that? It makes me sick to watch the footage, in fact, of ICE being protested actively and violently by Antifa members with seemingly no consequences. Every once in a while, you'll see ICE, combined with the might of the National Guard or something, drag a couple of Antifa protesters away from the crowd and arrest them. But that should be happening at a much more frequent scale, and the FBI should be involved in this because this is a criminal conspiracy, in my opinion, and it most likely is backed by George Soros. So where's the investigations? Where are the results? That's the main thing here. Where are the Epstein files? Where's any of it? Brian Underdahl 7974 says, Kash Patel deserves to get fired, but Trump will keep him around. Yeah, that's probably true. Wild Bassist. As a wild guitarist myself, I like that name. He says, I am a fan of the... Yeah. Hey, you know, I don't know. When it comes to Kash Patel, I wouldn't say he's committing treason here, but he's certainly doing a terrible job. Keystone Liberty 1776 says, when you have a government agency that shouldn't exist in the first place, how can you expect anything good to come out of it? 100% agree. One of my most loyal viewers here, Keystone. Appreciate you, man. And again, it's absolutely true. I've actually mentioned this before. We have way too many three-letter word organizations within this government that simply should not exist. I think ranking number one on that list should be the CIA. I think they've gotten America into a lot more trouble than needed. I think the letter C in CIA stands for corruption. You know, one of the greatest presidents of all time, JFK, he knew this to be true as well, which ultimately is probably what sealed his fate. CIA needs to go. FBI needs to go. We have too many of these intelligence agencies that are doing absolutely nothing for us and, in fact, are working against the best interest of the American people. Umpire 29 says 20% must think Christopher Wray is a fine fella. Now, I hate that argument. I hate that because, again, that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier in this episode even, where our Republican congressmen, our politicians that we elect as Republicans, don't represent us. And it's no longer good enough in this day and age for the younger generations, especially, for them to simply be Republicans or for them to simply not be as bad as the other guy. And so this whole argument of, well, he's not Christopher Wray, so he's doing a good job. It's just not true. It just isn't. Kash Patel overpromised and has severely underdelivered. basically giving us next to nothing. I mean, what has the guy bragged about so far being director of the FBI? Arresting street-level drug dealers? I expect that to happen at a local level. Regular police officers are capable of doing that if they weren't so busy writing stupid speeding tickets. I don't need my director of the FBI to be telling me, oh, but, you know, we arrested 4,000 drug dealers in America. Okay, good. Where are the high-profile names being investigated and arrested? We all know the names. We all know what we actually want here, and it's not being given to us. So yeah, he's not Christopher Wray. Good job, Kash. You're not a vile, corrupt scumbag like Christopher Wray. You're just instead a gutless, spineless coward who realizes that you're putting your neck on the line by delivering the promises you made, and all of a sudden, you don't want to do it. That's not good enough. It's not going to fly anymore. William Lane says, he meant well. I think somebody got to him. Yeah, maybe. Heyoika says, we can trust him. That's got to be rage bait. User JLJ says, show us some high-profile arrests, and maybe he would not be considered a failure. Just like his boss, Pam Blondie. Couldn't agree with you more, man. Libs are cooked. I recognize this guy. He's commented on my stuff before. Thanks for the support, man. He says, he's a clown. No politician arrested yet. WTF. Yeah. I don't think we're ever going to see that day either, unfortunately. Jeff Miller, 7817. I recognize this guy. He's actually, I would consider him one of my most loyal haters. Definitely a super liberal guy. Looks like he's the kind of guy that had the time of his life catching waves on the West Coast while Democrat policy just wreaked havoc on his state, but he couldn't be bothered because he's definitely a boomer. Nevertheless, he says, Kash Patel never should have had the job in the first place. No actual qualifications, which makes him a typical Trump pick. He has done nothing but screw up the FBI while doing nothing but Trump's bidding. Only fools think otherwise. Sad, but all true. Yeah, you know, the saddest thing about this is I read this guy's comments all the time when he posts stuff like this, and I usually think he's a moron, and I don't agree with almost anything he says, and I think he's full of emotional slop for the most part, but I halfway agree with this comment. That's sad. Jeff Wolf 8018 says, I lost respect with all of them when they said Epstein killed himself and there's nothing burger for the files. Clearly somebody's gotten to them, as this is the opposite they were saying months or weeks before they were in government. And that is really the saddest thing of all, isn't it? I've said this before, but it seems like Kash Patel especially, and Dan Bongino for that matter, deputy director, they knew a lot more about those Epstein files, the Epstein client list, the investigations, before they took those positions. And now, all of a sudden, it only took, 6 weeks of them holding those positions, where they just don't seem to know anything. And most embarrassingly was when Kash Patel was being grilled by Thomas Massie on it, and Kash Patel kept deferring to his staff. Well, I don't know. My staff looked at those files. I didn't look at those ones. I don't know. I trust my staff, though. Do you? Do you trust your staff, Kash Patel? If so, why? What about the FBI in general and the staff that works there that clearly has had a hand in its corruption over the years? Do you trust? What do you trust about them and why? Can't explain that one, can you? And for those reasons alone, that's why I personally completely disagree with apparently 81% of my community here when it comes to Kash Patel, because he absolutely should be fired. And he should have been fired months ago. I personally think he's compromised, but that's just my opinion. Let me know what your opinion is in the comments down below on this video.